Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So alhamdulillah, this is the 87th session inshallah, Seerah Khatam al-Nabiyyin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And just a quick review of 2 weeks ago. We went over, last week was the Ijtima, right? Yeah, last week was Ijtima, so we didn't have class. The week before that we had class. And we went over the expedition of Zat al-Riqa, where the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba went out to Najd to face the enemy who was preparing to attack the Muslims. And we talked about some incidents that happened during that journey, where, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, while he was resting, a man, they say his name was Ghawruth, he came and took the sword of the Prophet ﷺ, and while everyone was asleep, everyone was resting, and you could tell, they're traveling, so they were tired, and the Prophet ﷺ wakes up at the sound of his sword being taken out of the sheath, and a man standing with the sword to his face, to the Prophet ﷺ's face, and he says to the Prophet ﷺ, "Man yamna'uka minni?" Who is going to protect you from me? Who will save you from me? And we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ, in full tawakkul and reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said Allah. And the man became so fearful, or in another report, that Jibreel alayhi salam came and punched him in the chest. He flew back and he dropped the sword. So we learned how the Prophet ﷺ then put the sword to that man and asked him the same question: who's going to save you from me now? And the man said, "Kun khayra akhidin," become the best of those who wield the sword. And then the Prophet ﷺ actually advised him to become Muslim. He said no, and then he promised that he will not fight against the Prophet ﷺ. So Rasulullah actually forgave him and let him go back. And then it's related that when he went back to his people, he said, "I came from jitu min indi khayrin nas." I came from the best of the people. And it's all other reports that he actually became Muslim and started calling his fellow tribesmen towards Islam. Another incident that happened during that expedition or that ghazwa was Abbad ibn Bishr radiallahu anhu. We talked about how he and his brother in the Mu'akhat, Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu, they volunteered to become guards over the pass, the mountain pass, to watch over the Muslims to make sure nobody attacks at night. And while everyone is asleep, and Abbad radiallahu anh and Ammar radiallahu anh, they actually took turns. So Ammar radiallahu anh went to sleep first, and Abbad radiallahu anh did wudu, he started praying namaz. And after as he's praying tahajjud prayer, a man came and shot him with 3 arrows, one after another. And Abbad radiallahu anh continues praying his salah. Did not want to break the salah. And after that, when he realizes that if I die in this state or I fall unconscious, then maybe the Prophet might be attacked, or maybe something might happen to the Sahaba. So then he realizes, okay, I need to break my prayer, and he wakes up Ammar radiallahu anh, and Ammar radiallahu anh, astonished to see him in this state, he says to him that, "What made you do this? Why did you wait so long? 3 arrows are shot." And it's not like, one after another. It takes some time, a few minutes, you could say, at least for each arrow to hit and hit its target. And then he waited. So he said, "Why did you wait so long?" And he said that I was in the middle of a surah that I did not want to cut it short. I did not want to stop the recitation of the surah. So again, we talked about how the importance of Quran, understanding the Quran, and being in love with the words of the beloved, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should try to understand it and understand the meanings, and inshallah ta'ala we will fall in love with the Quran. Another thing we talked about was the second Badr, which happened in Sha'ban of the 4th year of Hijri, where the Abu Sufyan, after the Ghazwa Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Sufyan basically said, "We will meet you at Badr, at the same place of Badr the following year, and we will take revenge for what you did to us at Badr the previous year." So this is the 2nd year of Hijri was Badr, 3rd year of Hijri was Uhud, and then the following year, the 4th year of Hijri, where they're gonna do a second Badr basically. So that appointment was made, that time was set, and Abu Sufyan came out with his army, and the Prophet ﷺ also came out with the army. Abu Sufyan, in the middle of the way, they got scared and they actually went back. And the Muslims, on the other hand, Abu Sufyan had sent Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud, who was not Muslim at that time. He becomes Muslim later on. Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud was sent to the Muslims in Medina to scare them, so that Abu Sufyan can have an excuse. So he could say, okay, the Muslims never showed up, they never left Medina, so that's why we came back. To save his honor and his prestige. So he sends them, but the Muslims, on the other hand, when they heard that the kuffar have left Makkah and they're gathering and they're coming to attack, the Muslims' iman increased even more, and they started reciting Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Oh Allah, you are hasb, meaning you are enough for us. You're enough to take care of us. Wa ni'mal wakeel, and the best of those who take care of the affairs. So they recited that, and that increased them in iman, and they went out and they settled in Badr, stayed there for about a week, and the kuffar never showed up. The Muslims went back with their heads held high. They went back to Medina Munawwara, and the kuffar went to Makkah. They went back to Makkah, so there was no fighting that took place. So going on, some of the other events of the 4th year of Hijri.
It's called Badr Sughra, what do you call it?
Badr Sughra was not. No, Badr Sughra was the Sariyah right before Badr.
This one is called?
You could say Badr Athani. Yeah, Badr Athani is the second Badr. Yeah. Another thing that happened in the 4th year of Hijri is the passing away of the son of Uthman radhiyallahu anhu. So we know that Uthman radhiyallahu anhu, he had married Ruqayya radhiyallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Ruqayya radhiyallahu anha passed away at which battle? At the return of which battle? Badr. Barakallahu feek. So Uthman radhiyallahu anhu did not attend the battle of Badr. And the reason was because the Prophet ﷺ commanded him to stay behind and take care of his wife. So Uthman radhiyallahu anhu was not at Badr. And Ruqayya radhiyallahu anha passed away when the Muslims were just hearing news, receiving news that the victory of Badr. So this was Ruqayya radhiyallahu anha, the first wife of Uthman radhiyallahu anhu. Then we talked about how he married Kulthum radhiyallahu anha, his second wife. But they had a son. They had a son named Abdullah. So Abdullah, in the 4th year of Hijri, at a young age, he passed away. So he passed away, and this is the son of Ruqayya radhiyallahu anha and Uthman radhiyallahu anhu. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ had some other grandchildren. Also, maybe we can do a separate session on this sometime, inshallah, on Ahl al-Bayt, especially when, like just a couple weeks ago, the martyrdom of Hussein radhiyallahu anhu on Karbala. But we have, for example, we know that the Prophet ﷺ had another grandson named Ali radhiyallahu anhu from Zainab radhiyallahu anha, and he also passed away during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. There was another granddaughter, Umayma radhiyallahu anha, who was the one famous in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ would sometimes pray carrying her. He would be holding her and he would be praying, and then when he went for ruku and sujood, he would put her down on the ground, and then when he would get back up, he would pick her up again. So that was in the hadith, that was Umayma radhiyallahu anha. So we'll talk about that some other time, but we know that the bloodline of the Prophet ﷺ and Ahlul Bayt survived only through Hassan and Hussein radhiyallahu anhuma. Only through Hassan and Hussein radhiyallahu anhuma, the Ahlul Bayt, the bloodline or the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ survives through these two. Okay, so going on, we know that the Prophet ﷺ, in his mercy, and this is something that very how do you say, hassas, or like really sensitive topic, is that the Prophet ﷺ, why did he marry multiple wives? And this is something that the kuffar have always tried to attack the Muslims on. And we learned that during the 4th year of Hijri, 2 of the wives, so one thing, I mentioned this before one time, is that Aisha radhiyallahu anha was the only wife of the Prophet ﷺ who was unmarried before. She was a virgin, and she was the only one. And everyone else the Prophet ﷺ married, they were married sometimes 2-3 times, and then the Prophet ﷺ married them. So they were, some of them old in age, like Sauda bint Zam'a radhiyallahu anha, and some other, and Khadija radhiyallahu anha, his first wife, and the other 2 that we're going to talk about now. Also we talked about Hafsa radhiyallahu anha. The Prophet ﷺ had married her. She was also a widow. There was not a widow. I think her husband had divorced her. But there was another 2 women that the Prophet ﷺ married. during the 4th year of Hijri is, first of all, you have Zainab bint Khuzaymah radiallahu anha, and this is in Ramadan of the 4th year of Hijri. And the nickname that Zainab radiallahu anha was given, even before Islam, before she even accepted Islam, she was called Ummul Masakin, the mother of the destitute, the mother of the poor. And the reason behind this is the rahmah and the mercy and the generosity that she would show to the poor. She would give a lot of sadaqah and charity, and this is even before she accepted Islam. She was married to Tufail ibn Harith, and this is before Islam, and he had divorced her. And then her second husband was Abdullah ibn Jahsh radiallahu anh. And Abdullah ibn Jahsh radiallahu anh was martyred in which battle? In Uhud, barakallahu fiqh, yes, in the Ghazwa Uhud. And we know when you go say salam to the Shahada of Uhud, there's 3 graves in the front and then the rest of the Sahaba in the back. So you have Hamza radiallahu anh, Abdullah ibn Jahsh radiallahu anh, and you have Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh. These 3, their graves are separate. So Abdullah ibn Jahsh radiallahu anh, and also he's a cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was shaheed in the battle of Uhud. Okay, he was shaheed in the battle of Uhud. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam
he was the Puppy? Was the last name?
I believe Safiya, was it Safiya radiallahu anha? I have to look it up. I forgot exactly which. I forgot the name of the mother.
Sister.
Yeah.
Was the last name's father's sister?
Yes, yeah, Puppy, yeah. But I forgot which one. I think it was Safiya radiallahu anha, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. So Abdullah bin Jahsh radiallahu anhu was shaheed, and the Prophet ﷺ wanted to take care of this lady who had lost her husband. So Zainab radiallahu anha was married. The Prophet ﷺ married her, and she only remained a wife of the Prophet ﷺ for 6 to 8 months. So 6 to 8 months after marrying the Prophet ﷺ, she actually passed away, and they say she was around 30 years old when that happened. So she was only married to the Prophet ﷺ for about 6 to 8 months. Now later on, the sister of Zainab radiallahu anha is Maymuna bint Harith. Maymuna bint Harith radiallahu anha. The Prophet ﷺ marries her later on during the Hajjatul Wada. When the Prophet ﷺ is going for Hajj, he marries Maymuna bint Harith radiallahu anha, and she's the one, when you're going to Makkah from Medina Munawwara, or even from Jeddah, you can see on the right side, right as you enter into the checkpoint and stuff, you go, and on the right side there's a house that they have preserved, and that's actually the house of Maymuna radiallahu anha. It's right off the highway, right on the highway, you can see it, and that's where she was married to the Prophet ﷺ. That's where she lived before her marriage. Like, she grew up in the house, she was married in the house, and then later on she actually passed away and was buried in that place. So she was buried in that same place. So this is the sister of Zainab, Maymuna bint Harith. The Prophet ﷺ marries her later on. Also, one thing to mention about the mother of Zainab. So Zainab bint Khuzaymah radiallahu anha, her mother, her name is Hind bint Auf, and she's also known as Khawla. Okay, and they basically nickname her as the grandest mother-in-law on earth, meaning she's the best. She was the best mother-in-law on earth, and the reason is because of her son-in-laws. Basically, how many son-in-laws she had and who they were. So, for example, it's mentioned here, أمها هند بنت عوف بن زهير بن حارث الذي قيل عنها لا تعلم امرأة من العرب كانت أشرف أصهارا من هند بنت عوف. There's no woman known to be better in sharaf, meaning more honorable in her being a mother-in-law, and more honor in being a mother-in-law than Hind bint Auf, and that's because of her son-in-laws, Zainab wa Maymuna wa akhwatuha. So she had many children. I'm not going to talk about the boys, but I'll talk about some of the women. So her children, she had Lubaba bint Harith, and this is Fadl radiallahu anha, and she's the wife of Abbas radiallahu anh, the wife of Abbas radiallahu anh, and the mother of Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. The mother was Lubaba bint Harith. This is the daughter of Hind bint Auf, or Khawla. Another daughter that she had So the first one, Lubaba, she was radhiyallahu anha, she was married to excuse me, Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib radhiyallahu anhu, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another daughter, Barra bint Harith, and this is Maymuna radhiyallahu anha. Her name was changed later on when she got married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she married obviously the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so that's one son-in-law is Abbas radhiyallahu anhu, another is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, we just talked about Zainab bint Khuzaymah radhiyallahu anha. She was married also to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the son-in-law of Khawla twice, through Zainab radhiyallahu anha and also through Maymuna radhiyallahu anha. Another daughter was Asma bint Umays, and she was married one after another after they died by Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. When he passed away in Mu'ta, Ghazwa Mu'ta, after that Abu Bakr Siddiq married her, and then when he passed away, and this is after the Prophet ﷺ passed away and after the Khilafah, and when Abu Bakr passed away, then Ali married her. And then, so this is Asma bint Umays radhiyallahu anha. So that's another daughter of Khawla. Another daughter was Salma bint Umays. Okay, Salma bint Umays radhiyallahu anha, and she was married to Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. So she was married. One of the daughters was married to Abbas radhiyallahu anhu, and then one of the daughters was married to another brother, which was Hamza radhiyallahu anhu. So two brothers married to two sisters, basically. And you see that still happens nowadays. So you have Hamza radhiyallahu anhu, and then when he was martyred in Uhud. I'm sorry?
And one of the son-in-laws was Ja'far ibn Talib.
Yeah, that was Asma bint Umays. Yeah, this is Salma bint Umays. Salma bint Umays radhiyallahu anha, who was married to Hamza radhiyallahu anhu. And then after he was shaheed, he married Shaddad ibn Usama radhiyallahu anhu, one of the Sahaba. So these are, great son-in-laws that she had, and also she was the stepmother of another. I mean, the son-in-law is not known to be. He died as a kafir. He wasn't Muslim, but he was known to be a great man, a well-known man by the name of Walid ibn Mughira. So Walid ibn Mughira, who was the father of Khalid ibn Walid. Okay, Khalid ibn Walid, his father Walid ibn Mughira, he was a well-known, honorable man of the Quraysh, even though he was not Muslim. He married to Lubaba, the second, another Lubaba, who was also known as Layla, and the stepmother was Khawla radhiyallahu anha. So these are the son-in-laws of this woman. Another marriage that took place in the 4th year of Hijri is the Prophet ﷺ married Salama radhiyallahu anha. And Salama radhiyallahu anha, at this time she was old in age. I'm not sure how old. I mean, I'm not saying old, but she was not really that young, and she had 4 children. She had 4 children already, and she was the one. This is in Shawwal, the 4th year of Hijri, and her name was Hind bint Umayyah. Hind bint Umayyah radhiyallahu anha, Salama, and she was the one who we talked about when we talked about Hijrah. The first, one of the first people to make Hijrah was Salama. Abu Salama, the husband. Okay, so Abu Salama radhiyallahu anhu, he made the first Hijrah, and they were actually leaving together. The husband, the wife Salama radhiyallahu anha, and their son Salama, they were leaving together to Hijrah, and the two families, the two tribes came, and they basically took the wife and the son, and they said, no, we're not. You can go yourself. We're not going to let you take our daughter with you to Medina. And they were not Muslim, and they were enemies to Islam. So they said, we're not going to let you go. Then Abu Salama was forced to leave by himself, and Salama with her son, the husband's tribe came and said that we're not going to let you take our son, keep our son with you. So they took the son. So the mother and son were separated. The father was in Medina Munawwara, and they stayed like this for a long time. We talked about this in detail. So they stayed like this for a long time. Salama radhiyallahu anha, she loved her husband so much that she would actually go out to the outskirts of Mecca and basically waiting, and making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let her go to Medina, and then one day she was allowed to go with her son. So that was Salama radhiyallahu anha and the hijrah that they had made. And she mentions in one of the hadith that there's a hadith of istirja'. Istirja' is basically when you if a musibah comes, some kind of difficulty comes to you, so you say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and then you make a dua. This is istirja. So she mentions in one of the hadith, she said that atani Abu Salama yawman. So min indi Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Abu Salama radhiyallahu anhu came to me one day. So the men would be with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also the women would come into the masjid, but on this occasion the husband was with the gathering of the Prophet ﷺ, and he learned the hadith, he learned the dua. So he came home and he taught his wife right away. And this is something we need to understand, that whatever we learn and whatever we do, we should try to share it with our family, share it with our wives and children, and speak to each other, do ta'aleem in the house, and it's very important to do this inshallah ta'ala every day. So he came home, and he says that لَقَدْ سَمِعْتُ مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ قَوْلًا سَرِرْتُ بِهِ. I have heard something from the Prophet ﷺ that I am very happy to hear. I was very pleased to hear. And he said that لَا يُصِيبُ أَحَدًا, that the Prophet ﷺ said لَا يُصِيبُ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مُصِيبَةً فَيَسْتَرْجِعَ عند مصيبته ثم يقول اللهم أجرني في مصيبتي واخلف لي خيرا منها إلا فعل ذلك به. That a person does not get hit with a calamity or with a musibah, and then they do istirja, meaning they do inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and then they make this dua, Allahumma ajurni fi musibati, oh Allah, give me ajr for this musibah, for this calamity, وَخْلُفْ لِي خَيْرًا مِنْهَا, and change whatever I have lost, give me better than it. So this is a dua that we should recite. Anytime a musibah comes, we should recite this dua. And Salama radhiallahu anha, she says, فَحَفِظْتُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ, I memorized this hadith from my husband. So she says then, later on, we know that in Ghazwa Uhud, Abu Salama radhiallahu anhu was injured in the battle. And then later on, I think he got infected or something. And later on, after the battle, when he went back to Medina, he actually eventually died from that wound. He died from that wound. And when Salama radhiallahu anha, she herself narrates, she said, فَلَمَّا تُوفِيَ أَبُو سَلَمَةَ اسْتَرْجَعْتُ. She said, when my husband died, I did that dua. I said that dua. وقلت اللهم أجرني في مصيبتي واخلف لي خيرا منها. I made that dua. ثم رجعت إلى نفسي فقلت. And then I said to myself, after making the dua, because this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, she made the dua, and then she said, I talked to myself, I said to myself, من أين لي خير من أبي سلمة. How will I ever have someone better than Abu Salama? Like, how is it possible? She loved him so much, and she said, how will I find anyone better than Abu Salama? There's also another thing I forgot to mention, that before Abu Salama passed away, he actually talked to Salama anha, and he says to her that and this is showing the love he had for his wife, that he said to her that after I die, I want you to marry. Make a promise to me that you will marry after I die, so that basically so someone can take care of her. And anyway, so she says, how will I find anyone better than Abu Salama radhiallahu anh? And soon after that, we know that the Prophet himself came and visited her, and he proposed to her. So she says that when the Prophet came to propose to her, I said to her, قلت يا رسول الله ما بي أن لا تكون بك رغبة فيا. Excuse me. ما بي أن لا تكون بك رغبة فيا. That it's not that I don't want to marry you. It's not that I don't want to marry you. ولكني امرأة بي غيرة شديدة. I have a غيرة, or I have a غيرة, and this is like a jealous, not in a bad sense, not jealousy, but it's hard to translate this word, but it's like a jealousy when you want to protect something. When you want to protect something, like for example, like a jealousy that someone has over their mother or over their sister or over their daughter, right? That's a ghayra. Like like for example, someone looks the wrong way at their daughter, and that ghayra you have, that jealousy you have. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know in English what you can say for that, but so she said that I have the ghayra shadida, meaning that I'll be jealous of the other wives. I can't stand to share a husband. Okay, basically she's talking about, if I marry you, you have other wives, and I won't be able to stand that, and I'll have that jealousy within me. فأخاف أن ترى مني شيئا يعذبني الله به. So I fear that you might see something, I might say something, I might act in a certain way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might punish me because of it. Meaning that I might say something out of my jealousy, out of my ghairah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might punish me for it. وَأَنَا امْرَأَةٌ قَدْ دَخَلْتُ فِي السِّنِّ وَأَنَا ذَاتَ عِيَالٍ. She said that, and also I'm old of age, and also I have children. She had 4 children at that time. So these are the reasons why she's saying that there's no reason for me not to want to marry you, but these are reasons she's giving basically that I cannot marry you. The Prophet ﷺ responded by saying, أَمَّا مَا ذَكَرْتِ مِنَ الْغَيْرَةِ. She said that the Prophet ﷺ said that what you have mentioned about the ghairah, about your protective jealousy, I think that's what it's called. Protective jealousy. That from your protective jealousy, فَسَوْفَ يُذْهِبُ اللَّهُ مِنْكَ. That I will make dua for you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take out that from you, meaning you will not be jealous of the co-wives. وَأَمَّا مَا ذَكَرْتِ مِنَ السِّنِّ فَقَدْ أَصَابَنِي مِثْلُ الَّذِي أَصَابَكَ. And the Prophet he says to her that as for the being of old of age, I have been, I'm under the same thing. Basically, I'm getting old too. I'm not any younger than you, right? So he's saying this to Salama radhiallahu anha. And then he says, وَأَمَّا مَا ذَكَرْتِ مِنَ الْعِيَالِ فَإِنَّمَا عِيَالُكَ إِيَالِي. That what you have mentioned about your children, so your children are my children, meaning I will take care of your children. So like don't think of them as I'm going to put them to the side, they're going to be like, oh, I'm the stepfather, I'm not going to take care of them. They will be like my own children. So he answered all 3 of her concerns, barakallahu fiqh. Yeah, all 3 of her concerns, he answered them in this way. And then she answered, she says, Sallamtu li Rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning that I have, she approved or she acknowledged that she will marry him. So she says after that فَقَدْ أَبْدَلَنِي اللَّهُ بِأَبِي سَلَمَةَ خَيْرًا مِنْهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Then I realized that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has answered my prayer, and He has actually given me someone, a better husband than Abu Salma radhiallahu anhu, and that is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we'll stop there inshallah, and next week I will be traveling, so I'm not going to give the dars, but the following week inshallah we'll continue on. The obligation of hijab is something I want to talk about. This also occurred in this year, and then we'll continue on with the 5th year of Hijri inshallah. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين.